My name is Ethan Riley, and the first thing I remember about that morning is the way the paper sat on my kitchen table like a dare, the kind of print that makes your stomach go tight before your brain catches up. I skimmed the headline and laughed, because who names someone else's private dock a community retreat without asking? Then I read the details, and laughing turned to that cold, steady kind of anger that makes you slow down, like you're watching someone else's bad decision unfold. They'd listed the address, used our cabin picture, and signed the newsletter as if the whole neighborhood had agreed. I walked out to the gate, locked it, and sat there with the deed in my hands. I'd spent years fixing that place on weekends, a weathered roof, a stubborn dock post 2 winters ago, late nights putting up insulation so the place didn't feel like a cave. I'm not litigious, not a scene maker, but there's pride that comes with a place you built with your hands, and when someone treats that as their convenience, it stings. Margaret Hale, the HOA president, is not subtle. She showed up that afternoon with a clipboard and 3 volunteers, all smiling like everything was normal. "Ethan," she said, real bright, "we just want to make the lake available for the block party. We sent notices to everyone." I told her I never got a notice. I told her the dock and the cabin aren't a public amenity. She tilted her head and said, "This is about community, like that settles it." That line, community, would be used a lot in the days to come. Over the next day, my phone lit up. Someone had scanned the newsletter QR code and contracted toilets, tents, catering invoices tied to my property. Numbers climbed into the thousands. I called vendors, told them the property was private and insured by the owner only. Some apologized, others said they'd been promised payment. The vendors were caught in the middle, expecting to be paid for services already booked. The real problem wasn't the bills, it was the entitlement, the casual belief that a public space exists where none had been granted. Pressure turned toward me. Margaret came back with a volunteer, a man with the look of someone used to getting his way. He parked in front of my gate and asked to let the organizers in. I said no. He smirked. "We can always call a locksmith," he said, and reached for his truck tools. I'd looped tamper wire through the latch, put up a private property sign, and pulled my deed and survey. When the locksmith arrived, he refused to cut the wire without a court order. "Not worth his license," he said. That small, professional standoff bought time and forced the issue into paperwork rather than bolt cutters. People started arriving, neighbors confused, families who'd paid for a party. You could feel the embarrassment in the crowd. Someone lugged a folding table and realized she had nowhere to put it. A father looked at his child and then at me like he wanted answers. I tried to explain liability. If a kid slipped on my dock and something happened, insurance wouldn't cover an unauthorized event. The words felt small in the face of picnic coolers and folding chairs, but they were true, and truth is useful when tempers hum. Then things went uglier. One of Margaret's supporters, Cole, big and loud, tried to pry the gate with a wrench. He let the wrench clank against metal in a way meant to intimidate. When I stepped forward and told him to stop, he spat. "It's public now." He raised the wrench for a second like he might force the latch. People stepped back. A hush fell, and I felt the weight of how quickly things can escalate with one small, threatening gesture. There was that flash of adrenaline, the animal part of you that decides what matters most right now, and it said, "Don't let them in. Don't give them this." I recorded it not to rile people up, but to have a record. I logged vendor calls, saved invoices, wrote down names. Mrs. Alvarez, 2 doors down and once a paralegal, became my ally. She'd lived here 30 years and saw the pattern. Small grabs of power like a hole in a dike. She started calling neighbors, gathering statements. A few folks who'd been on the fence before suddenly remembered other times Margaret made decisions unilaterally and felt differently about it. We filed a complaint with the HOA and sent a certified demand: cover vendor costs or rescind the notices. Margaret answered with thin politeness and more insistence about community, but after a lawyerly letter landed on her table, her language shifted the way it does when people smell risk, smaller, a little clipped. She asked for a meeting to clear the air, and we set a time. The community center is not glamorous fluorescent lights, folding chairs, a sense that anything that happens here will be modest. Still, the room felt like a stage. Margaret's supporters sat on one side, neighbors on the other. I laid out the facts, the surveys showing the boundary line, invoices from vendors, the video of Cole at the gate, and the emails tying the newsletter to Margaret's committee. The mediator listened and then pushed us toward resolution. In the meeting, Margaret's tone shifted between defensive and hurt. She sounded like someone who really believed the glow of community covered mistakes. "We thought it would be nice," she said, like that explained everything away. I didn't shout. I wanted the neighbors who were watching to hear reason, not the sound of two people yelling. I explained that good intentions aren't a legal contract and that promising vendors without owner authorization risks real liability. The mediator suggested a settlement. Margaret would cover immediate vendor costs and agree to a clearer event policy, with written approvals required going forward. There was bargaining and a little theater, and then signatures. It wasn't about revenge. I wasn't trying to ruin anyone. I wanted boundaries that would hold, so the next person who wanted a picnic didn't assume permission where none existed. Margaret signed the agreement, and the relief on her face made her look human again, tired, a little ashamed, but willing to do the paperwork that undid the mess. Afterward, things changed, not overnight, but enough. We adopted event checklists, clear lines about property use, and for a while the rancor cooled. I replaced the temporary sign with a carved wooden one. Private dock owner access only, no events without written approval. It was plain, firm, and it felt like a return to normal. Months later, at a properly organized potluck, I stood by the lake watching neighbors talk. Margaret moved a table without meeting my eyes. Mrs. Alvarez laughed at something a kid said, and the small acts of neighborliness felt like stitches closing a wound. People can choose to be decent, and sometimes that's how a neighborhood heals. Still, something nags at me: the ease with which community was used as a cover, and how quickly authority can masquerade as kindness. It's tempting to cast Margaret as a cartoon villain, but that would cheat the story. She's human, maybe insecure about her role, maybe convinced popularity mattered more than process. The danger comes when that insecurity becomes permission to ignore other people's rights. If you take anything from this, make it practical. Keep your deed and survey accessible, document incidents, and talk to your neighbors before assumptions harden into notices. When you hear "for the good of the community," use like a trump card. Ask questions politely, firmly. And remember, most people won't escalate if you stay calm and keep a paper trail. So tell me, what would you have done? Was I too rigid, or was Margaret abusing a bit of power for convenience? Has your HOA ever crossed a line? Drop your story in the comments. Tell me where you stand on community versus consent, and if this resonated, share it so others can weigh in. If you want more neighborhood stories, real people, real fights, and the quiet ways we fix things, subscribe, and I'll keep telling them. Thanks for listening.